Hi, I'm Jesse, and welcome to Jones University. This 4th of July is different from most because this year, America turns 250 years old. That means it has been 250 years since the Declaration of Independence announced that these colonies were no longer under British rule. Now, if you compare that to ancient Egypt or Rome or China, 250 years may not sound all that impressive, but America's birthday matters for a different reason. The remarkable thing is not just that this country has lasted 250 years. It's that for 250 years, Americans have been trying something that has always been difficult in history. Self-government. Not ruled by a king, not ruled by an emperor, not ruled by a dictator. But the idea that ordinary people can govern themselves, restrain their leaders, make their own laws, and still remain one nation under God.
And that is much rarer than it sounds.
Lots of nations have lasted a long time, but many of them were held together by a throne, a dynasty, an empire, or a strong man. America tried something different. It tried to build a country around the idea that power should belong to people, that leaders should be limited by the law, and that freedom should be protected rather than merely handed out by a ruler.
So today we don't just want to talk about fireworks, cookouts, and the events of 1776. We want to ask a bigger question. What makes America so unusual, and why is turning 250 such a big deal? When Americans say the country is turning 250, we're counting from 1776, the year of the Declaration of Independence. But declaring independence was only the beginning. The much harder task was building a government that could survive real-life wars, elections, economic crisis, arguments between states, expansion across a continent, and enormous cultural change. That is one reason this anniversary matters so much. America didn't just make a bold statement in 1776. It had to build a system strong enough to carry that statement forward.
And here's one of the most important facts in the whole story. The United States Constitution is the oldest written national constitution still in use anywhere in the world. That doesn't mean America is the oldest nation. It isn't. But it does mean the basic framework of American government has endured for an extraordinarily long time. A lot of countries have had constitutions, a lot of countries have called themselves republics, but many of those systems collapsed, were overthrown, or had to be entirely rebuilt. America has changed in many ways over the last 250 years, but the core structure of the government has remained. That's one reason this birthday matters. It isn't just the age of the country, it's the endurance of the experiment. One thing that makes America different is the fact that the government itself is designed to be limited. That sounds obvious to us because we've grown up with it. But for most of history, government was not something that limited itself. Kings, emperors, and rulers usually gathered power into their own hands. The people existed to serve the ruler, not the other way around. The American system tried something different. It said government should have real authority, yes, but that authority should be divided, restrained, and bound by law.
That's why power is split between the Congress, the president, and the courts. Each branch has real power, but none of them is supposed to have it all. If too much authority gathers in one place, are flawed. Eventually, it will be abused. In other words, they didn't build the system on the assumption that leaders would always be noble. They built it on the assumption that leaders were human and therefore need boundaries.
And one of the best examples of that came right at the beginning.
After After the Revolutionary War, George Washington was one of the most admired men in the world. He had led the army to victory. People trusted him. If he wanted to cling to power like a king, he might have tried, but he didn't. He stepped away from military power, and later, after serving as president, he stepped away again. That helped establish one of the great habits of the American system. Leaders are supposed to hold office temporarily, not permanently.
One of the most unusual parts of the American experiment is not just that people get to vote.
It's that they are supposed to be free to speak, free to disagree, and free to criticize the people in charge. That idea is protected in the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right to assemble, and the right to petition the government. That may sound normal to Americans, but is not normal in world history. In many places and times, rulers controlled what could be said, what could be printed, and who is allowed to criticize the government. A king, a dictator, or a ruling party might tolerate praise, but not dissent.
America tried something much riskier. The idea that truth is better served when people can argue, write, publish, and protest those in power. That doesn't mean every speech is wise. It doesn't mean every newspaper is honest. It doesn't mean every opinion is good. It means the government is not supposed to be the final referee of what citizens are allowed to think and say.
And freedom of the press matters for the same reason. A free press is one of the ways a people keep watch over power. If the government can silence criticism, hide wrongdoing, and punish people for telling the truth, then liberty becomes very fragile. A free country needs citizens who can speak honestly, worship freely, gather peacefully, publish what they believe, and tell the government when it's wrong. That kind of freedom can be messy, but it's one of the reasons America has stood out. America also became known for something else, being a place where people could build. Build a farm, build a store, build a machine, build a company, build a better life than the one they started with. That doesn't mean success is guaranteed. It isn't. But it does mean America developed laws, customs, and institutions that made it easier for ordinary people to own property, sign contracts, start businesses, invent things, and take risks. In many societies throughout history, opportunity was more tightly controlled by class, family name, guild, or government permission. America never removed every barrier, but it did become a place where an ordinary person had a better chance of trying something new.
And one of the unusual parts of that story is that America became a place where failure didn't always mean the end. Henry Ford's early businesses failed. Walt Disney struggled badly before he succeeded. In many places throughout history, a failed venture could ruin a family for generations. But America developed a culture, and in many cases laws as well, that gave people room to attempt something, fall down, learn from it, and try again. And over time, that helped make America one of the most innovative nations in history. American inventors, builders, scientists, entrepreneurs, and artists help create or popularize things that change life all over the world. Skyscrapers made possible by modern steel construction, the airplane, the light bulb, the assembly line, the personal computer, the internet, GPS, jazz, film, and rock and roll. Not every one of those ideas was invented by one person, and not every breakthrough was only American. But America's unusual mix of freedom, property rights, universities, markets, immigration, free speech, and room to fail helped turn ideas into world-changing realities. That's part of what people mean when they talk about the American dream. Not that success is automatic, but that the door is not nailed shut.
America is not only unusual because of its government, it's also unusual because of the land itself. When Americans sing about amber waves of grain and purple mountain majesties, and from sea to shiny sea, they're not just being poetic. They're describing a country with an incredible range of landscapes and climates. The United States stretches from the Atlantic to the Pacific and includes desert, forests, plains, wetlands, islands, giant rivers, farmland, mountain ranges, and frozen wilderness in Alaska. In fact, the United States contains nearly every major climate zone found on Earth.
That matters because land shapes people.
A fishing village does not live like a wheat farm. A mountain town does not look like a coastal city. A ranching community does not build life the same way as a crowded urban neighborhood. And that's one of the reasons a place like the Colorado National Monument fits this story so well. It reminds us that America is not one flat, identical place. It's a country of mesas and canyons, forests and plains, harbors and deserts, skyscrapers and farmlands.
So when we're talking about sea to shining sea, we're talking about more than geography. We're talking about the challenge of holding together a free people across an enormous and diverse continent. That alone would be hard, but America added another layer of difficulty. It tried to do that while welcoming people from many different places and backgrounds into the same national story.
Over time, people came to America from nearly every corner of the world.
They brought different languages, foods, customs, music, trades, and memories with them. Some came for opportunity, some came for land, some came for religious freedom, some came because there was nowhere else to go. And one of the unusual things about America is that it was never held together by one ancient bloodline or one tribe or one ethnic story. Heritage matters, of course. Family stories matter, but America had to find another way to become one people.
The answer that Americans tried to build around was shared ideals. Not that everyone would look the same, not that everyone would talk the same, and not that everyone would come from the same place, but that they could still become countrymen under the same constitution, the same laws, and the same commitment to liberty and self-government. That's part of why America has often been called a melting pot, not because every difference disappears, but because many different people tried to become one nation without erasing every family's story. So why does America turning 250 actually matter?
Because for 250 years, this country has been attempting something rare.
A nation where law stands above rulers, where leaders are supposed to be restrained, and where liberty belongs not just to the powerful, but to ordinary people.
It built a government strong enough to act,
but limited enough to be checked. It protected speech, a free press, and the right of citizens not to be helpless before power. It spread that government across a continent and somehow kept the same constitutional framework alive through war, conflict, prosperity, and crisis.
It became a place where people could build, invent, risk, fail, and then try again, where life was not supposed to be handed down entirely by class or title or birth.
And it did all of that across deserts,
in mountains and rivers and plains, with people from many different places, trying to become one country.
America has never been perfect. It has failed in serious ways, correcting some things, delayed correcting others, and carried its own sins and contradictions like every other nation in history. But even with all of that, the United States is our home. Being born here means opportunities for average citizens that would have made most kings of the past green with envy. We love living here, and we believe the American experiment remains extraordinary. Not because everything here is easy, not because everything here is right, and not just because the country is old, but because for 250 years, ordinary people under God have all, in one way or another, participated in governing themselves. Happy 250th birthday, America!